Ladies and gentlemen, the Midwest Slice of Life presents MAM-O-GRAM, the Marty After Midnight program. And now, here's your host, Marty! Hi everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of MAM-O-GRAM, Marty After Midnight program. I just said it was the Friday edition. Anyway, I hope you're all doing good. Again, thank you for tuning in and listening to me babble on. I'm amazed anyone does, but it seems like I think right now we've got an audience. We'll see how it grows or whatever, if it does. But it seems like there's about 20 people that are watching this if I go from the page views. We had one that went over 100 page views, but that was one I hyped on Facebook. So I think the natural audience is like 20. But again, with this, I'm just kind of doing this for my own amusement. I'm really not going to get all obsessed with the page views. That's what happened before. I think next week I'm going to kind of talk about my whole history with YouTube. But tonight, what I wanted to tell, I've done in the past. In fact, I think I started it in 2018, maybe. These shows called the Marty Monologues. I've done like 3-stage versions. We did one at a Christmas version. It lit on fire. We've done one at my friend Amber and Joe's basement during the pandemic for my friend Claire. It was fun to do. And I've done one at Bradley. I actually got paid for doing it at Bradley, so that was cool. But the one at Bradley, that was at the end of January 2020. And about 2 weeks later, the old COVID blew into town. They shut the Apollo down. They've never opened it up again, and that is the ideal place to do one. I would like to do another one. I got an idea for one, but maybe I'll talk about that later. Maybe I'll do it on here. Anyway, probably my favorite one out of all the ones that I did, I did one about growing up in the 60s. There's 3 stories about growing up in the 60s. And there was a story that I cut. A lot of times I have to cut stuff out of the show. And Amber and Joe kind of help me with that. They're kind of the editors of it. I do the shows for them. And I can't remember if I did this for them or if I just cut it on my own. I had 2 Beatles stories about Beatle albums. And I already talked about seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in it. And I thought I had to cut one of them. One of them was about Sgt. Pepper, which I kept in the show, about my brother getting it for his birthday. And the other was about listening to Revolver for the first time. That got cut. So I've told the story to people, but I haven't told it in a format like this. So here it is. We were living in Louisville, Kentucky at the time, our family. We moved there in 1963 and we lived there until 1969. And this is in August of 1966. And I know the kind of the exact date because it's when the Beatles' Revolver album came out, which was August of 1966. I do remember me and my brother Jim were in our front lawn, just kind of messing around outside. It was I think it was a Sunday afternoon. We're there, and this kid, Johnny Sagg, who we used to hang out with, I was 8 years old in 1966. Jim was 10. And Johnny was in between us. He was 9. So we were 8, 9, and 10. But we used to do a lot of stuff together, play and ride bikes, whatever, you did back then. But we were all big Beatle fans, too. He comes running down to our house. We're out in the front yard. We're like, hey, what's going on? He's like, my sister's got the new Beatles album. She's got the new Beatles album. It's called Revolver. We're like, you're kidding me. No, her and her friends are going to listen to it like in a few minutes. We're like, oh, let's go see if we can listen to it. So we go running. He lived like a block away. We run down to his house and run in the door. I remember this so clearly. Ran in the door, up the stairs, to her room. Now, the 3 of us are kind of just standing there, and it's his older sister with her 2 friends. Like I say, we're 8, 9, and 10. They had to be like 14 or 15. I know they were teenagers. They seemed like older girls to us. We're in the doorway, and his sister looks at us. She's like, what do you 3 want? And Johnny was like, hey, can we listen to the Beatles album with you guys? And she kind of put her nose in there, and then Johnny's like, please, we're all kind of whining. Can we listen to? And that noise, that dinging noise was my mail. Anyway, she relented and said, all right, you can listen, but you got to shut up the whole time. I don't want to hear your stupid chatter. She was kind of giving. She was kind of a grump. The other 2 seemed a lot nicer. I remember Johnny's sister had dark hair. There was one had blonde and there was a redhead. I remember all 3 by their hair colors. And she relented and said we come in and we're kind of standing there at first. And my eye is itching. She had a little record player, I remember, on a little table, one of those things where you lift the lid up on it. So she turned her backs to us after kind of telling us off. And when she turned her back, I like made a face behind her so she couldn't see me, but her two friends could, and John and my brother Jim could too. I'm like, and I didn't say anything, but I did it silently. Well, everybody starts laughing, and she spun around. She's like, "What's so funny?" And the redhead turned me in, and then I think she felt bad about it. She's like, "Oh, Marty just made a face." And she looked at us. She's like, "You know what? I told you that I didn't want you guys here because you're going to be pulling that stuff. Hey, get out of here. You can listen to it later." And we're kind of standing there, and the redhead stuck up for us. She's like, "Oh, let him stay and listen. He was just being funny." And she looked at me. She's like, she called me Pipsqueak. She's like, "Okay, Pipsqueak, but enough of the faces and no talking." So we agreed. And she went around to back to putting the record on the thing. And I looked at the redhead, and she looked over at me, and I kind of just smiled at her like, "Thank you." And I'll never forget it. She looked at me and she winked at me and gave me like a smile. And I remember, like, I was 8. She had to be 14 or 15. And I think that's like the first time I ever had like feelings toward a girl. I didn't know what was going on in her. My stomach kind of felt like jelly. I think she thought it was funny that she's like got this kid all going nuts. But I'll never forget the little wink and the smile at me. So anyway, they put the record on. Now we're all sitting around in like a half circle. I remember I was on the end. There was Jim, Johnny Sag in the middle. Johnny's sister was next to him, then the blonde, then the redhead. I remember this so clearly. And we were just sitting around the record player. The girls were saying a few things, and we were passing the album cover up back and forth to each other. And they were looking at the different cover. And the cover was like something else because it was the first time the Beatles had a drawing on the cover, not a photo of them. And the album before Revolver was Rubber Soul. That was a big deal because it didn't say the Beatles on it. It just said Rubber Soul. And that got a lot of attention saying, well, the Beatles no longer have to put their name on a product. They just had to put their faces. Well, now that they didn't even need a photo. They had this drawing. The drawing was done by Klaus Vormann, who was a friend of theirs. He played on a lot of their solo stuff. He played bass, but he was also a really good artist. He drew the cover. I'll put the cover up. And so he drew it, old friend of theirs from the Hamburg, Germany days. And he drew the cover, and then the back cover was them. They were all wearing sunglasses. And I remember as we're listening to it, the chatter from the girls was kind of negative. They didn't like it. They're like, why would they be wearing sunglasses in a dark room? Well, the reason they were wearing, because they were probably high out of their minds. Revolvers when they started doing acid. I mean, they had been smoking pot before, but it's when they were entering their big drug/acid phase, and the music was changing. So they didn't like that. One of them said they didn't look as cute. They looked more like old men. They didn't like the drawing on the cover. They thought that was stupid. They wasn't getting a very good review. And the album, too, was the first album that ever had. It had 3 songs by George on it. And one of them was the first, like, all-out sitar song called Love You Too. And it was all sitars, a tabla, really far-out stuff for that time, for 1966. They'd introduced the sitar on Rubber Soul on Norwegian Wood. They played a little sitar on that, but this was a full-blown George Harrison sitar song. There was other stuff on there that wasn't. Yellow Submarine was on there. There was other songs that didn't fit into the Beatle mold, especially the last one. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the last song, and that's my favorite song on the album. Tomorrow Never Knows. Man, my mind is going. Tomorrow Never Knows. That was the last song, and when that played, the girls hated that. And when that was over, we kind of all got up, and she like kicked us out of their room. But they didn't like it at all. I remember the thing, they're not cute anymore. These songs are weird. We like the old ones better. They didn't like the changes. I mean, what was happening is the Beatles were going beyond being the cute little mop tops into being like a really up-and-coming band. So I don't really remember what we did like for the rest of the day, but I just remember Jim and I walking home. And I don't remember the redhead's name, but we're walking home, and I said to Jim, I'm like, I really liked that album. The girls didn't like it. He said, "Oh, they're idiots." He said, "Yeah, that's their best album. I'm gonna ask for it for Christmas." We always got an album at the Christmas and our birthday. That's the Sgt. Pepper is the birthday story. I'll tell that next week. So anyway, they're idiots. It was a great album. I thought so too. I'm like, I really liked that last song, and I did. It was like the craziest thing ever. That was kind of the start of psychedelic music. What everyone says tomorrow never knows was. But then as we were walking along, I'll never forget. I said, well, let's call the redhead Brenda. As we were walking along, I said to Jim, I'm like, did you see that Brenda? She smiled and winked at me. And Jim laughed and he's like, "Oh, Brenda winked at me." He said that you were also called a pipsqueak, so I don't think you're going to be going on a date with Brenda anytime soon. And then we kind of laughed about it and kept going on home. And but it is funny. I'll never forget listening to Revolver, and I'll never forget Brenda or whatever her name was winking at me. And I wonder what she is doing today. If you're out there, Brenda, if you're watching, leave a comment, send me something, let me know what's going on. If I was 8, and let's just say she was 14, she was a teenager. She had to be 14 or 15. So she's 6, 7 years older than me. So she's 71 or 72 if she's still around. So if you are, Brenda, redhead, hello, thank you for the wink. I've never forgotten it. And that was the story of the first time we heard Revolver, one of those life moments you never forget. The Beatles, and Revolver is my favorite Beatles album. I like all of them, but that is my favorite. And I think that's kind of something. It's always been a fun memory for me. So that's tonight's story, Revolver by the Beatles. First time listening. This is MAM-O-GRAM, the Marty After Midnight program, brought to you by the Midwest Slice of Life. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to be off for the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. I'll be back on Monday with another story, maybe some more freelance talk. I'm going to start talking about the book next week, too. I haven't done much with that. I got to get back to it. But I have a new title for it that I want to talk about. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Have yourselves a lovely little weekend, and we'll see you Monday afternoon. All right. Thanks for tuning in.